Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander, Tough Rules, and Cool Interactions, episode 96. Today's episode is going to take a look at how some Magic cards can see each other, and when I say see, I'm doing air quotes. In Magic, we often use the term see for if a card is able to interact with another card or if an effect like a triggered ability is able to be triggered by something. We recently got a bunch of commanders that care about enchantments and even some commanders that create a new kind of enchantment called a role. Traditionally in Magic, auras have been looked a little down upon because players don't like to get 2 for 1 or 3 for 1. But I'm seeing a lot of these decks run cards that you can actually get some value off of these auras going to the graveyard, but I'm guessing that there will be some confusing situations that happen that make it so that it's not so clear as to when these cards will see these auras. So let's jump into some scenarios. You're playing your Onyxia deck, which gives you access to green, white, and black for your color identity. So now you control your Gilwain Casting Director, and he has the ability of, whenever Gilwain Casting Director or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. And the 3 options are to put either a Royal role, a Sorcerer role, or a Monster role token to attach to that creature. So with your Gilwain, you have amassed quite a board of creatures with auras attached to them. Among these creatures, you control a Wicked Visitor, a Fimrith Enchantress, and an Ashiok's Reaper. Each of these respectively say, whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. Whenever an enchantment is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. And then whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So all 3 of these cards care about your roles and other auras and enchantments going to the graveyard from the battlefield. So, scenario 1. Your opponent casts a Ruinous Ultimatum that destroys your board comprised of your Gilwain, Wicked Visitor, Fimrith Enchantress, and Ashiok's Reaper, and all 4 of them have a role attached to them. What triggers and how many times do they trigger? You have 4 creatures, and each one has a role attached to them. So, what will happen after all is said and done? Pause the video if you want some more time to try to figure this out on your own. The answer to scenario 1 is that each of these 3 creatures that triggers when an enchantment goes from your battlefield to your graveyard will trigger for each of these 4 roles that was attached to them. So 12 triggers in total, you will draw 8 cards, and your opponents will each lose 4 life. Even though these creatures are not going to be out on the battlefield still alive when they do trigger, the way the triggered abilities work in Magic is that they look back into time to see what the game state looked like before and what it looks like now. Before, there were 4 roles on your creatures on the battlefield, and now the game state is that those roles are in the graveyard. And for those wondering, yes, tokens do go to the graveyard and are not removed from the game until state-based actions are checked. You can see that in CR 704.5D. So even though those creatures died and are no longer on the battlefield, alive to trigger, their triggers still saw that game event happen. Scenario number 2. Everything is the same as the previous scenario, except this time your opponent casts a Wrath of God instead of the Ruinous Ultimatum. After all is said and done, you will still have the same results. 4 creatures are being destroyed, and then also 4 roles that were sent to the graveyard from the battlefield. So how many triggers will happen in this case? Obviously, the answer is again 12, right? Because the same results happened, right? In this case, the answer is that 0 triggers will happen. The Wrath of God only destroys the creatures that were on the battlefield, but not the auras that were attached to them, and the other things that were attached to them. So those will not actually be destroyed until state-based actions are checked after the Wrath resolves, in which case CR 704.5M will send the auras to the graveyard, and it says that if an aura is attached to an illegal object or player, or is not attached to an object or player, that aura is put into its owner's graveyard. So in the Wrath case, yes, all 4 creatures were destroyed, and also the 4 auras made their way to the graveyard from the battlefield, just like in Scenario 1. But in Scenario 2's case, they got there at 2 different times, and so the creatures with the triggered abilities were no longer on the battlefield to see those enchantments go to the graveyard via that state-based action. So as long as the destruction spell kills things at the same time, then we don't have to worry about SBAs getting in the way of killing the creatures with the triggered abilities too quickly. And on that note, your bonus question. I'd like to see your answers down in the comments below. I'm curious to see what you guys think about this one. For bonus question, scenario number 3, once again, we'll keep all of that stuff the same, except this time the opponent is going to be casting Austere Command instead of the Ultimatum or the Wrath. And when they cast this, the 2 modes that they choose are the Enchantments mode and the Destroy All Creatures with Mana Value 3 or less mode. This means that Gilwain, Wicked Visitor, and Fimrith Enchantress will be destroyed. Like in Scenario 1, the effect that's doing the destroying is hitting both the enchantments and the creatures as it resolves, so we don't have to worry about SBAs getting in the way of things. So how will this change by only destroying 3 of the 4 creatures through something like this Austere Command? How will this be different? How many triggers will you get? Which ones? Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta. And I do apologize for those of you sticking around to the end. I apologize for not getting a video out last week. I have been very, very addicted to Starfield. I've had a few other things that have been dropped on my plate and been distracted by many, many other things, but especially Starfield has been taking up a large chunk of my time. So if anybody still watching the video, listening at this point, if you guys have been playing Starfield, post some comments about that. Do also, give me your answers on what you think will happen for scenario number 3. But are you enjoying Starfield? Have you beat the game? I have not, so please do not include any spoilers. I've been doing my best to avoid spoilers about all the New Game Plus stuff. I see it keep popping up. Things are different about New Game Plus. I don't want to know what until I get to it, but I've been going slow and steady exploring and things of that sort. So, all right, yeah, video's gotten long enough already. You guys have a good one. Ta-ta.